RHOP, Karen Huger shocked watching her DUI bodycam footage. Former RHOP star Karen Huger was just sentenced for her DUI arrest, but she did have to watch the bodycam footage at some point. When she finally did see the behavior she exuded, Huger was shocked at what transpired. So what exactly did she say and when was it shown to her? Keep reading for more details. Karen Huger shocked watching her DUI bodycam footage. Although Karen Huger was arrested in March 2024, she just had her sentencing for her DUI arrest. When she was arrested, she asked the officers if they knew who she was. They did not, and then she continued on with her groundbreaking speech and other additions regarding Thomas Jefferson. At the time, she claimed she had one beer before leaving a friend's home. Yet more alcohol was discovered in the car, and this was not her first offense. That was something the judge took into account when sentencing her. She received 2 years in prison with 1 year suspended and cannot drive for a year after her release. Additionally, she announced that she was exiting the RHOP and would not return next season. This came before her sentence was handed down, but it seemed she did not want to be held accountable. Possibly she knew that she would be incarcerated, so she wanted to decide for herself. Either way, she did not appear at the Season 9 reunion, as she claimed she was seeking help. However, Andy Cohen promised she would be there in some capacity. As promised, during the Sunday, March 2nd airing of the reunion, Karen Huger and her husband, Ray, were shown. According to Page 6, they were speaking about her arrest as she had just been found guilty. She admitted she had yet to see the disturbing bodycam footage from the night of her arrest before her trial. More so, she did not want to see it, but when she did, she was shocked by her behavior. Who's that girl? Despite Karen Huger knowing what the footage held, seeing it happen before her eyes was a huge wake-up call. She admitted that this was all her fault, and she had no one to blame but herself. Regardless of whether she took accountability or not, she still drove under the influence and caused a wreck. Karen stated she was headed to rehab to deal with this, but she stayed less than a month at a wellness facility. While in front of the judge, she had this to say. After RHOP fans saw this small segment, what were their thoughts? Let's stop with trying to force sympathy for a habitual drunk driver for spent 2 days in rehab. She's clearly lying and trying to do damage control. This is her 4th DUI. I don't drink and drive, but have had 4 DUIs. Karen Huger sat stiffly on the pristine, white leather sectional in her lavish Great Falls home, a chilled flute of champagne trembling slightly in her manicured hand. The glow from the oversized television screen illuminated her face, highlighting the unmistakable blend of shock, embarrassment, and defiance in her eyes. The Grand Dame of Potomac had weathered many storms, but tonight, the tempest came from her own past decisions. On the screen before her played the raw, unfiltered bodycam footage of her DUI arrest, a moment she had tried to put behind her, yet one that had now found its way into the public sphere. It was one thing to read headlines and hear whispers. It was another to see herself, vulnerable and unguarded, in the unforgiving glare of flashing red and blue lights. The video began with an officer approaching her sleek black vehicle, the rumble of the engine barely audible over the crackle of the police radio. Karen watched as her own voice, slightly slurred yet still regal, filled the room. "Officer, do you know who I am?" she asked, her signature air of confidence attempting to mask the tension in her voice. Her eyes darted to the present moment, seeking solace in her husband, Ray, who sat beside her, his expression unreadable. His hands were clasped together, and though he had always been her rock, his silence was heavier than words. Their son, Brandon, had chosen not to join them for this viewing, claiming he had already seen enough online. Karen swallowed hard. Back on screen, the officer was asking her to step out of the vehicle. The camera's angle caught her perfectly as she smoothed down her designer coat, attempting to regain composure. The lights bounced off the gleaming gold buttons, a stark contrast to the dark road behind her. Then came the field sobriety test. Karen winced as she watched herself attempt to walk in a straight line. Even in her most extravagant heels, she had always prided herself on her grace. But in this moment, captured forever, she faltered. The officer's voice was patient yet firm, instructing her through the test as she struggled to maintain balance. "This is ridiculous," past Karen muttered. "I had one glass of champagne, maybe two, but I'm the grande dame." In the present, Karen inhaled sharply, bringing the glass to her lips but hesitating before taking a sip. Her reflection in the glass was a reminder. This was not a dream. This was reality. And reality, no matter how much she attempted to shape it, was not always glamorous. The video pressed on. The moment of handcuffs clicking around her wrists sent a chill through her. She could see the heartbreak in her own eyes, a realization that no title, no prestige, no reputation could save her in that moment. The camera caught her sitting in the back of the police vehicle, her head tilted back, blinking rapidly as if trying to hold back tears. Then, almost on cue, the Karen Huger fire ignited. "You don't understand. I am an important woman in this community. I have charities, businesses, a legacy to uphold." The officer's response was calm but unwavering. "Ma'am, tonight, you are just another citizen who made a mistake." That sentence hit harder than she had anticipated. The words lingered in the air, even now in her elegant home, surrounded by luxury. No amount of privilege, wealth, or influence could undo what had happened that night. The video ended, cutting back to a news anchor discussing the public's reaction. Karen reached for the remote and shut the television off before they could go any further. Silence hung heavy in the room. Ray finally spoke. "Karen, what do you want to do now?" She exhaled, setting her glass down. "I own my truth, Ray. Always have, always will." She stood, straightening her silk blouse, smoothing her hair. The grande dame was shaken but not broken. She had faced worse, and if there was one thing she had learned in the world of Potomac, it was that every scandal was just another chapter in the story. And the grande dame? Well, she always had the final say. Tomorrow, she would craft her response. Tomorrow, she would reclaim her narrative. But tonight, she allowed herself to be human. Karen Huger, the self-proclaimed grande dame of Potomac, had always carried herself with an air of sophistication and control. She prided herself on being a woman of poise, grace, and undeniable authority. So when the world learned that she had been involved in a DUI incident, the shockwaves reverberated through the Real Housewives of Potomac fanbase like a well-aimed champagne flute shattering on marble floors. But nothing could prepare Karen for the moment she saw the Bodycam footage for herself. Seated in her lavish Great Falls estate, a glass of water, this time just water, trembling slightly in her well-manicured hand, Karen took a deep breath. The footage was queued up on her flat-screen television, the remote resting beside her. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, the only sound being the rhythmic ticking of a designer wall clock. Ray, her ever-patient husband, sat nearby, his face a mixture of concern and quiet support. Karen had always been the star of her own show, but now she was about to witness herself in a performance she wished had never aired. As the footage began, Karen gasped. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated her face in the night, casting a stark contrast to the typically polished image she projected on screen. She watched as her past self stepped out of her luxury vehicle, her posture slightly swaying. "Oh dear God," she muttered, pressing a hand to her forehead. The officer's voice was steady, professional. "Ma'am, have you been drinking tonight?" On screen, Karen lifted a hand, as if trying to summon the poise that usually carried her through the most dramatic housewives' confrontations. "Officer," she began, her voice slurring just enough to make her present-day self wince. "I am the grande dame." A mortified groan escaped Karen's lips. "Oh no, not that." Ray stifled a chuckle. "Well, you are consistent." The officer's expression remained impassive. "I understand, ma'am, but I need you to perform a few sobriety tests for me." Karen watched as she tried to walk a straight line, her designer heels betraying her with every wobbly step. The camera captured her frustration, the slight pursing of her lips, the deep breaths of someone who still believed she could control the narrative. When asked to recite the alphabet backward, her on-screen self blinked dramatically before responding, Baby, I barely do that sober.